Hello everyone, Kenneth Martin here from the Hard Hat Talks podcast. I'm joined today by Vivien. Welcome, Vivien.
Hi there.
Hi there. Vivien, you're here from New College, Lanarkshire. I've got a habit of getting that tongue twisted. New College, Lanarkshire. Tell us a wee bit about yourself, Vivien, in terms of how you get involved in the role at New College, Lanarkshire.
Okay, so I'm a lecturer teaching on the Computer-Aided Architectural Design and Technology course. We offer an HNC and an HND course at New College, Lanarkshire, and I've been there now, I think, 17 years. In the black and white days, I qualified as an interior designer, and there was no jobs back in those days. And I was all sitting at a drawing board during my course, and I had one wee tiny unit doing AutoCAD. I think it was AutoCAD Release 12, if I go back to, and that's maybe showing my age, kind of the early 90s. And it was something that I can't say I particularly overly enjoyed, but having found no real employment in interior design, what my first passion was, I dabbled in and out of different jobs, worked for a kitchen design company that subsequently did other building aspects, I guess, and then found myself working as a wee short time for the Bank of Scotland call centre. 8 years later, working in the Bank of Scotland call centre and 3 children later, I thought, right, things have to change. What can we do? So I discovered my course at New College, Lanarkshire. It was then Motherwell College, and it was architectural technology. And I thought, well, I'm interested in the interior of a building. I'm also interested in the exterior of a building, but I don't know anything about that. Didn't know anything about where AutoCAD had gone from the days that I had briefly used it. I'd never heard of Revit, didn't know anything really about construction. So I did that whilst working part-time with 3 very young children. I then did my degree at Edinburgh Napier University in architectural technology. I then did my teaching qualification for further education through Stirling Uni. And by the grand old age of 40, I'd finally qualified to be a lecturer. So I have been now lecturing, and that does not add on 40 plus 17 years. I was already teaching while I was doing my degree. I don't you dare get the calculator out. So yes, so I've been there for a good number of years and seen the changes and seen the transition of where our industry has gone. And you know, I'd like to think I've helped a lot of students get into employment, try to make my own impact, I guess, on the course. I've got a great bunch of lecturers, got great colleagues with superb knowledge and experience and technical knowledge, and I think we've built the course up to being something really pretty special.
Great. I'm just curious there, you mentioned the course. How many students would typically come through the course in an annual year?
The students will start off an HNC year, and typically I will take in 2 class groups, which will be anything up to about 40 students, just depends year on year. Very often that will then be compressed down to having 1 HND, which is your second year students, and it's the equivalent of second year at university. So HNC is the equivalent of year 1 at university, same level. HND is year 2 at university. So currently I've got 24 students, which is a bit of a challenge because I've got 22 computers in a CAD lab, but we manage. So 24 students who will be ready to complete the course just in another month's time.
Right.
And then they'll be ready for getting out into industry. Some will progress on to university, but we've found over the years a lot don't need to go to university because you actually learn so much more in the workplace. And you know, the mentoring within industry is pretty spectacular, and they can still achieve their chartered status without actually going to university and achieving a degree.
I think that's the thing. I follow a few people on LinkedIn and social media, and there's a kind of feeling just now that university for some people could be a bit of a waste of time. You know, accumulating the debt and realistically getting out there into the big bad world and finding a job is something where you learn there's a lot of debate in architecture circles about how we go through a 7-year course.
Yes.
So 7 years, two of which is working in practice, and then the question is you don't really become useful to the employer until maybe you've done a few more years. Yeah. So I think there's a lot to be said for what you do learn in university, though, as a student, as an architect.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say my time at university, no, it wasn't particularly enjoyable. Yes, I did learn some things, but I think the biggest takeaway that I have from it, and it's a thing that SQA certainly are on our side for that, closed book exams, even for school kids for that matter, you're testing that somebody has got photographic memory, that they can learn something. Now, us in our industry, if we need to know something, we're not going to think, have we memorised the technical handbook? We're going to go and refer to the technical handbook. We're needing to get information about whatever kind of system or materials or planning processes or whatever it might be. We're not plucking that from memory. We are going to go and find out and source what the most up-to-date version or the most up-to-date standard is. So that's a thing that I found very much at university, was how much information could I retain to then go into a closed book exam. I mean, there were some open book things and there were some projects and stuff which were very good and I guess quite valuable. But these are things that time has to go changing, because we would instantly refer to, whatever the mandate is or whatever the standards are, and get the most up to date, because things change so blooming quickly in our industry.
Yeah. That's interesting what you say there, Vivien, because I remember as a younger architect, and as architects, and even your students, we'll be becoming aware of all the policy and regulation there is in our industry. So as architects, we face constant changes. But I remember my mentors when I was coming through as a young architect, not qualified, but on the journey to become qualified, and they always said to me, Kenneth, it's not knowing the answer. It's knowing where to look for the answer.
For it, absolutely.
And that's the thing that sets us apart.
Yeah.
And I don't think, well, maybe some clients would expect architects to know everything, but it's just becoming so impossible now.
No.
It's becoming so impossible to retain everything about every policy and every...
Well, I find even updating my teaching material, obviously on an annual basis, I can't go confidently talking about the technical handbook, because there's always remediations, there's always updates, and there's always revisions. Although there's a new version of it, then there's a revision on top of that. In the early days, I would do a PowerPoint all about the REBA plan of work. And the REBA plan of work, every 2 years, they were changing all the stages, they were changing the names of the stages. So now we will go to the REBA plan, REBA, and then we'll look at the plan of work from there. There is no point in me rewriting that, because it's just happening and with the changes in there. We concentrate quite a lot on BIM. So the students are learning a lot. Currently, the HNC students are just learning the theory about BIM. And when we're talking BSEN ISO 19650, well, again, there's so many updates constantly changing in there. So you're not just going to refer to, what were the notes I had last year or 2 years ago, because these things are always changing. So we need to, you can't sit still for 2 seconds in our industry, not at all. Blinking, it's changed. Updates in software every single year. What's new? Oh, heck. Yeah.
Well, talking about not sitting still then, in terms of the New College Lanarkshire, and before we go on to the big hard-hitting question, which is why we're here for today, but tell us a wee bit more about New College Lanarkshire and maybe what they're doing just now to move forward as a college.
Well, the course that we have, the computer-aided architectural design and technology, what a mouthful. Our course was written and devised at the college, I want to say maybe about 30 plus years ago, believe it or not. And we have I'm going to say we're the ones that have written the course, we've written all the units for the course, we update the units in the course, we write the assessments for the course. And probably on about a 5-year basis, we update the course, because things change, like we've just been saying, things are always updating. So what we like to do is we like to reach out to industry and say, right, what's changing? What's new out there? What should we be embedding into the course? And although we're on the brink of thinking about doing a new rewrite, And after we've rewritten it and SQA have approved it, it'll then be rolled out to the City of Glasgow, Forth Valley, all the other colleges offer the same course. But things that we are quite heavily looking at, concentrating on, is thinking about, we can't entirely shy away from AI. AI is with us, like it or lump it, but we're going to have to think, how can we utilise AI without it replacing our jobs? We're also very interested in and having a big concentration on VR. Obviously, VR is a big player. You know, within we've had 3D printers since I think time began. I think we were one of the first places to have. We had a massive 3D printer when we moved into our new premises at Ravenscraig, and so again, that's maybe 16 years ago. We got a massive big 3D printer, which is no longer working. But we've got multiple little the smaller 3D like plastic 3D printers. So we've been using them for years, and we're developing our skills and utilising them as much as we can. We've got 3D scanners. We've got a drone. So we're trying to use and look at what are the future technologies. You know, again, we're back to, well, obviously there are new softwares coming out all the time, and softwares that link in with AutoCAD, that link in with Revit, that link in with the rendering processes that we have. And we're always trying to, okay, what's new? What's the next stage? What's the next thing that we need to be embracing and rolling out to our students so that they can be as industry ready as possible when employment time comes?
So AI then, that's an interesting one, because there's a lot of buzzwords about AI. So AI for me, it's probably just chat GPT, and we kind of use that.
Yeah.
But I know AI is much more sophisticated, that although I don't know how or why. So you've mentioned AI, and you're looking at what types of, what does AI do then within the college, within the course?
Well, SQ have got a policy saying no AI is to be used, and that's a thing that we're kind of struggling to be on board with. And I've had a meeting with SQA. I'm on the quality standards team with SQA, and this is a big topic that we've had. So, for example, a written assessment produced, I had 3 written assessments produced, I'm going to say possibly 2 years ago now. I had 3 students that it was identified, and this is where one of our college softwares can pick up whether AI is being used. And it was written work, and 3 really good students, it identified they'd used AI 100%. One student was Polish. He'd written his whole essay in Polish. He'd then put it through Google Translate to convert it into English, because his English wasn't brilliant. And that flagged up 100%. But I also had 2 extremely good students who were poor writers. I say poor writers, that's not even necessarily true. They had quite severe dyslexia. So what they would do is they would write their reports, they would put the reports then into AI and say, refine, rewrite, you know, or not necessarily add anything to it, but put this, you know, properly format it. And again, that flagged up as being 100% AI. Now, I don't think that's wrong. I don't think either of these examples that I've given you are wrong. And I've got students now, so what I say to them is, if you're going to be, if you are a poor writer, you can't structure a sentence, you don't know when to use punctuation or paragraphs or whatever it might be, you write it, you put it into ChatGPT and get it to be refined so it's looking more professional. But you give me both versions, so I know that you've not asked ChatGPT to write you an essay on whatever it might be. And that's my loophole, and I'm hoping that that's going to be legit and okay.
Obviously, as an employer, that's right. Because as an employer, the last thing I would want is to take on a very talented technician who's great with the computer, technically competent, who then I know is going to be client-facing to some extent. And if the written word is not expressing what's there, I'd want that to be fixed. So I'd be perfectly okay with AI. You know,
well, that's the approach that we've taken. But you know, we're beginning to again kind of dabble in, and I don't know quite necessarily how I feel about this, with saying using AI to come up with potential layouts or organisation of spaces, or you know, things like that. Now, I'm not entirely sure, because I don't want to feel that we are having no human impact in design. That's why we are designers. That's what our skill sets are. So I don't want us to be eradicated from the marketplace, you know, altogether. But if it can be an assisting tool, definitely that can be beneficial. And, you know, there can be great information that can be found. I've got one of my colleagues actually uses ChatGPT almost like Google, and will ask a question. And albeit, you know, it might be something not necessarily even educationally related or, you know, relating to our job at all, but it can be putting information in to say, do me a fitness plan, and ChatGPT will come out with a full fitness plan, or looking to do, you know, some kind of diet or whatever it may. So it can be, it's almost replacing a Google search. But more tailored to the specifics of what you're asking. Great. But maybe not so great. And this is where, and you know, we've heard and we've probably seen these examples where it's, I want a photograph of a poodle sitting with a mountain region behind on a stormy day with a sunflower behind its ear. Suddenly there it's there. So we know that these things are, you know, we know what the capabilities are. So can we use it to our advantage without it doing away with our jobs?
For the job. Yeah, I think that's the thing that probably scared me and a lot of my contemporaries as architects is, what will the role of the architect become? And actually the more, even, I know that AI will advance, I know that those systems you just mentioned about will advance, but I can't imagine a world whereby we take the built environment as it is just now, and that a computer will be able to generate a design that complies with all the policies in terms of, you know, car parking, road safety, all of that stuff. And then all of a sudden it's going to generate a set of construction drawings that complies with the whole requirements, that it takes a lot of the human thinking out.
Absolutely.
I just can't see how that's going to work.
Does it then mean that we don't have a planning department? It'll just be, you know, I don't know. I can't see it.
And then we take these drawings that's potentially then done by a computer or AI, and you give them to the man on site and say, build that. And there goes, I mean,
and is there a man on site to build it, or is it?
Well, do you know, it's an interesting thing, because I think if you look at some repetitive type constructions, I think AI could go a lot further with that. So, for example, building static caravans, for one of, you know, I think AI could go a lot further with that. And you could probably, to some extent, you know, put robots in to manufacture on assembly lines, all that stuff. But I think all of that then comes down to the efficiencies of sales as well. I can't remember the name of the company, but there was companies recently who've went under just after COVID because they had set up multi-million-pound assembly lines to roll out housing. You know, and the lines worked. They could produce so many houses in a week. It was unbelievable. But the problem was there was no demand.
No, I know.
You know, and the companies eventually they went under because no one's coming saying, right, we'll buy the 100 houses you're generating this week. Because it's the whole thing of, then you've got to get them through planning, get them on site, get them sold. You know, to the homeowners. So there's a disconnect there, I think. But I'm watching AI, you know, quite closely. I've spoken to accountants who say that some of the AI is very good. It's a company who does audits. So, and an audit process is a two-stage process, as described to me. An accountant would do the first audit, and then a second accountant would audit the first accountant's work.
Right. Okay.
So what they've done, double checking. But what they've found is that the bot that they've got is trained, and that will do the first audit, and then the accountant will audit the bot's work. And what they're finding is that the bot is actually quite good at doing the audit. So, you know, maybe numbers and stuff. So I am kind of watching to see how it's being applied in different industries. But I think the design industry, give me a wee image with a moon and a star and a Ferrari, then it'll do that. It doesn't look 100% realistic just now, we know that, but that will get better. But in terms of producing buildings, you know, physical buildings on site whereby an architect's got a different view on a style or a language, you know, I just can't see how that's going to happen.
No, I don't know where it'll go, but I think it's with us, and I think we need to embrace it. And that's partly what we've kind of looked at, thinking, right, how can we use it to our advantage, to students' advantage? It's out there, it's not leaving us, and it's ever going to be evolving. So keeping an eye on it basically, and trying to keep up just with future technologies and future, all these things that are in this fast moving industry that we're in, just so that we don't fall behind. And I think that's quite an important part as educators, that we need to always try and be at the forefront where possible.
I wonder as well if all this technology, that's just my opinion, if all of this technology is actually benefiting us in the long run. I mean, because my wife and I sit, I've just turned 49 and 3/4. So my big 50 was last week. And we were sitting thinking about us when we were younger. We've got 2 kids who are just coming, just about to leave high school. They don't know a world without a mobile phone.
No.
I remember going into the office and actually checking your emails in the office because they were never on a mobile. I remember going in and checking your voicemail because, it was in the office.
Yeah.
I remember the days you could leave the office and switch off. All of that stuff is gone now. But when I look at all the technology that's came on board to apparently simplify our lives, the world's in such a messy place.
Yeah, it's probably made it more difficult. But could we go back to a time when you couldn't reach where your children were or your partner was or anybody? That you would need to carry a camera around with you if you wanted to take a photograph, or all the technologies. Definitely, I mean, I think we've
saying that it's retro. I know it's a bit retro, but my daughter got what was it for her Christmas? She got one of those wee pink retro cameras.
Oh, did she?
She runs around now with and I actually find it weird because she's got one of these iPhones, which is I mean, they're expensive, with a camera in it, and she can email and blah blah blah. And she now chooses to go around, with a wee pink digital camera that's just to plug into a computer to get the photographs.
Oh really? Oh no, mine are going back to Polaroid cameras.
Well, see, retro. I don't know. I don't know.
Oh well.
The Hard Hat Talks podcast, I always get that tongue twisted. We're really here to try and dive a bit deeper into what's happening in the industry and some of the challenges that the guests come along with. So I know you've got a burning challenge that you want to talk about. So for the listeners and the viewers, do you want to just dive into that?
I was really wanted to have a chat about kind of bridging the gap between education and industry. It's something that's been close to my heart for again a good number of years. Probably about 10 years or so ago, having a conversation with students in class and asking the question, have you ever had an interview before? And they say, oh yes, have you interviewed me for coming on the course? Well, it wasn't an interview. Others would say that yes, they'd had an interview because they worked for McDonald's or for Tesco. And then I realised the penny dropped. Hold on, you've never had a professional interview. And a professional interview, as you will all know, is a very, very different Tesco, McDonald's, or coming onto my course interview. So it was probably 10, 11 years ago that I thought, right, okay, I'm going to try and see if I can get in contact with former students who are now working out in industry and say, can you do me a favour? Can you speak to your boss and can you maybe see, can they maybe arrange mock interviews? So that is where my journey, I'm going to say, initially began. And then from the mock interviews, we started doing CV writing. Well, that goes hand in hand. So they obviously tried to give them as much information about CV writing. Bringing in recruitment agencies or HR people who could then give them good pointers about what your CV should look like, what the content should be, what the flow should be, the length of it, and all useful information like that. And again, this started to kind of grow arms and legs. And I thought, well, all the jobs that you're looking at from leaving college, your choices after college are going into employment or going on to university, joining university at year 3, doing 3 and 4, and then you've got an honours degree in architectural technology. And some students wanted to do that, and some students, well, maybe didn't. And I get all mixed bags of students, some 17 straight from school, some 35 have been on the tools all their days, and then the back aches and the knees ache and the whatever it might be. So everybody's in a different position. So I then tried to think, could I organise work experience just for a week? It's not, nothing spectacular, it's unpaid, but to give the students the actual insight into how a design office will run. So again, utilising my contacts with former students. I used to have Facebook groups, but Facebook, of course, is no really the in thing now. I used to have Facebook groups. So I would, again, reach out to the students and say, go and ask your boss for me. And as this has now transitioned over these last maybe 10 years, these former students who used to ask the bosses, they're now the bosses, right?
Yeah.
So they're now completely on it. And what they also find is, so yes, the students go out for a week of work experience. And then they get feedback on their CVs, they get feedback on their interview, they get feedback on their CVs, they get feedback on their work experience. And then and it has to be, I'm going to say, and I mean, maybe it's a wee bit on the nasty side, but to say, be as brutal as you can with the feedback. The students need to learn how to improve. Don't just go, oh, that was really good. We want to be able to know what improvements are required. How is a better way to lay out your CV? What about your portfolio? How should your portfolio look and read? And of course, everybody will have a different take on that. But kind of as a result of that, we've then been able to get a lot of students directly into employment. And I think it's been beneficial for employers as well. Now, I could be talking about architectural firms. Well, you've supported my work experience programme countless years and employed several students from me over the years, Kenneth. Thank you very much.
One of which is now his own boss.
Yes, absolutely.
Right, yeah.
I know, well done. So I think we're finding that it's beneficial also for the architectural. So as I say, it could be architectural firms, it could be interior design, structural, it could be MEP, it could be civil. I've got landscape. I've got students going off in all different walks of life, just based on the education, if you like, they've had from the college, which is fairly generic. Although we're talking architectural technology, we do cover so many different aspects of it. But I think if you were to go wanting to employ somebody and you went to a recruitment agency and the recruitment agency then had to find and source and interview or set up the interviews, that's costing you money. Whereas if you can then say, I am looking for somebody, oh yes, we'll embrace the work experience programme, you might just find that person that you're looking for. You might also realise you didn't think you were looking for somebody, but you know what? There's some raw talent there. And that's something that I can go taking on board. So over the last 3 or 4 years, well, I've had a great stretch of students going into employment. And over the last, funnily enough, I'm going to say over kind of the COVID period, I was having almost 100% success rate. Some students, yes, they wanted to go to university. Okay, they're out of the equation. And all the other students who are looking for employment after an HND, 2 years with me, were walking straight into employment. Fantastic. Last year, numbers changed a little bit. And I don't know whether maybe some of the students were getting a little bit complacent and sitting back and going, well, Viv will get me a job. No, it doesn't always happen like that. But this year, I would say, is the biggest change that I've seen for quite a stretch. Yes, all the students, all 24 have been out and done a week of work experience. There's been great feedback. There's been great interest. A handful of them have landed roles. But I think just with the pullback from the council projects and from government projects, I don't know whether we're having a wee dip. I think this is what I'm seeing just now with employment rates. I don't know whether there's just lesser amount of projects that are happening. Just saying, coming back from Mallorca last week and passing Glasgow, the flyover coming onto the M74 at Glasgow and looking at the Glasgow skyline, 3 cranes, that's all that I saw.
Yeah.
Now, normally you see that whole skyline littered with cranes because of the amount of construction that's happening. So that's looking a lot quieter. And I thought, oh, that's not looking too good. And I'm definitely seeing the impact on my students just now. And they need that break. They need that first job. If they were to go and see a job advertised, it's, oh, you need X number of years of experience and experience in this and experience in that. They don't have that experience. But what they are coming with is most up-to-date software or standards and compliances and technical information and an absolute buzz and drive to work and to learn on the job and want to absorb as much information as they can. So you know what, you would get your money's worth if you took one of them just now.
Yeah.
Please employ.
Well, I think that's one of the things that's quite interesting because we are in a bit of a kind of lull just now in the construction industry. We've seen over the last few years, as you quite rightly say, local authorities who have pulled the plug on a lot of projects. I wonder now, though, if some of them are starting to show some green shoots, maybe just starting to to move projects along. I think that's a result of COVID. I can't mention specific council, but I know that the specific council got to about 4.5 years into a 5-year plan and went, oops, COVID is really, the budget's just gone. So for them, it was to nudge their finances through to the end of that financial year to get the release for the following year. We're starting to see some of these councils manoeuvre. I can't say they're setting head on fire, but they're certainly manoeuvring.
Yeah.
And that would hopefully give, colleges, yourselves, universities, places for students to go.
Yeah.
We've noticed actually that I've noticed, because it's usually me who gets them, a downturn in the number of Part 2 students
who
are applying to block architects for placements. I wonder as well if there's a bit of what's the point, because students will talk to each other. I was on a podcast recently where I said the same thing. I was going through university, was going to do my first year out, which would have been fourth year effectively, and I was trying to get a job, and there was nothing coming in. And I actually had the forms filled out to go to the police.
Oh, really?
I thought, big tall guy, that's it. Go to the police, set career for life. And then lo and behold, that day it was actually my tutor who phoned, says, "I've got an interview in London. It's on Friday. You want to go?" I thought, might as well. And I got the job.
Really?
But I think there is changes have happened over the last 2 years, as you rightly say. Albeit, I don't think things are don't think we're like, I remember a 2007-2008 recession. That was disaster stuff. I don't think we're there. No. I think we're just kind of teetering. And we need
it's just not hugely healthy, but it's hopefully, hopefully it's not going to be long sitting with us, and we will see the turnaround. I've got far more students applying for university this year, maybe more as a backup in case employment doesn't come. But as I say, I've got 40-year-old students, I've got, not now 17, 18, 19-year-old students. So I do have a mixed bag, and they've all maybe wanted different things, and maybe some of them feel, right, I'm ready for employment, and others feel a wee bit still, that, even them going out to do work experience, it's that age-old question about, what do I actually know? They don't know what they know when they go out, so they're terrified. And some will kind of overcome that when they go out to do work experience, and they'll appreciate, actually, I have actually learned a lot, and I do actually understand quite a lot about this job. But there's going to be some that still maybe don't quite have that confidence. And from that's maybe when another couple of years of university, and just maybe a wee bit of maturity and a wee bit more grounding and a wee bit, obviously, more education. But the sad truth of the matter is, if they do another 2 years at university, I'm not fighting for a job for them. I'm fighting for a job for them when they're my wains. So while they're HND, this is where I'm fighting for them to get out into employment. And I've got, I refer to them as my wains. All my former students, whether it's through, mostly it's through LinkedIn now, which is our saving grace. And, we've got so many former students actively using LinkedIn, and if they have got the opportunity, or they've got the place within their industry, within their business, that they can offer work placements, summer paid placements, or whether it's actual full employment, they've been very, very supportive. And it might have even been from students who weren't even involved in the work placement scenario. It might have been students from 15, 16 or 14 years ago prior to me doing this, but they get it, they get how that is. And you remember going out to doing your first experience, and you remember how terrifying that was, and you remember having that lack of confidence.
In London.
Well, there you go. Well, that's even 10 times worse than my wains.
We shots boy planked in London.
But so everybody's scared, but everybody, regardless of what walk of life you've been in, you've had to do that first day somewhere. And if everybody can just, remember that 17, 18, 19, 42-year-old student coming in to do that placement, how scary that is. Even coming in just for a pretend interview. Well, they know that it's a mock interview, but that mock interview actually might be kind of a real interview. And the week of work experience might actually be a week-long interview, because it's testing the water, possibly. So, nerves are very high at that time of the year. So that happened in what was that, the end of end of February, I'm going to say, was work experience. I had a couple just out over Easter time as well. And we're just hoping that the jobs start dripping through.
Yeah. I think you've mentioned LinkedIn there. I've kind of taken a revolution myself personally and within the business. I'm really looking at LinkedIn as a kind of marketing strategy for us. And some of your students have followed our page and kind of follow me, etc. And I think the big thing for any employer now really is that your team and your staff do engage with social media.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes.
and it's a culture shift.
Yep.
Because we've got 8 in the practice here, and all of them engage with social media, but to different levels, different extents. And I think as an employer, if I was now considering taking someone else on, I'd really want to think carefully and closely about how well that person does engage with social media. It's not just a matter of saying, well, yeah, I've got a social media account and I'm going to tick a post or like a post and share something every now and again.
No.
We're really looking for people who are going to be influencers in the industry.
That's what it's all about now, isn't it?
Yeah. And I say that because I've had someone coaching me how to become a bit more of an influencer on LinkedIn, particularly because that's where I've chosen. Albeit we're doing a podcast now, and probably,
of
but
course.
There is that thing of I think social media is one of those things that I don't love it. You know, I do it because I feel I need to. And because I've got a business. Would I do it if I didn't have a business? Probably not.
No.
You know, so as an employee, you know, put employee mindset on. You think, well, you know, it's not your business, so why, you know, you've turned up to do a job. So why should I spend, you know, half an hour or 50 minutes every day helping you with the social media campaign? But the reality is now as an employer, I'm saying to myself, right, unless you can prove to me that you're really engaged in social media, you know. But I do think that's an important thing. I think it's an important thing for colleges to think about, you know, yeah, you do LinkedIn, but are you really doing LinkedIn? And what benefit do you bring to your business or to your employer in terms of how they can promote their business? You know.
Well, I'm with you with that, and I try to be active on LinkedIn. I'm also super nosy. I'm like Isa. I like to know what everybody's doing, what companies are doing what. I like to know where all my former students have gone, who shifted on to where, and I always think, oh, is there a wee recycled job there? Does that mean there's an opening happening? So there's that side of things, but I also like to keep a wee reminder, hello, we're still here. So it might be something trivial, like I've taken the students for a walk around the college campus to look at bricks and expansion joints. That photograph will go up onto LinkedIn as a reminder. By the way, we're still here. Please come and make contact with my students, make contact with me, please employ them. And also to kind of demonstrate what their skill sets are. You know, we did an interesting little tour, which, to be very honest and quite embarrassingly so, my first time visiting our plant room within the college. And this is not really connected to any of the actual subjects that we do, but the students are working on their end of year project, their graded unit project, and they are designing halls of residence. So it was thinking about, well, what's required for the plant room now? Not actually what's required for the plant room, but what dedicated space would be required for the plant room more than anything. So we had a lovely tour just by our estates manager, you know, and it was super interesting. I'm like, oh, I know actually quite a lot about this. And even the students, and although, you know, as I say, we don't cover that as an actual topic, but we do have a lot of students that go into M&E or MEP, whatever we're calling it this weather. A lot of students do go into that and they actually have a lot of interest in it. And I guess they learn a huge amount of that on the job. And it's the software, I guess, that's kind of going to worm them in with that. But yeah, super interested for that. So again, that was posted across LinkedIn to say, by the way, did you realise that we can do this as well? Do you realise we do a wee bit of landscape design? Do you realise we do a bit of, you know, to try and kind of cover all bases?
You've got to cover all the bases because you don't necessarily know what field that each student's going to go into.
And as I say, they go off in such wild and wonderful directions.
I think as an architect, the plant room is something we know needs to go in the building, but we go, well, somebody
else can deal with that.
What size it's to be.
Exactly. Well, that's kind of the...
We'll draw it and go, right, over to MEP.
That's kind of the route that we've gone down.
Yeah.
There's an allocated space, but that's about... And then we'll leave the experts to deal with that.
And it's always the space. I'm thinking of one of our projects, and if a client's listening, she'll be laughing at this, because we always get in the meeting and go, we need more space, right? Just take it off the plant room.
And the plant room just shrinks and shrinks.
MEP guys sitting there going, I just give me a dog basket and I'll put all the plant in that in, because there's no space left.
We'll stack it up. We'll just go up the way.
Vertical plant rooms, that's it.
Oh my goodness.
That's it. No, it's interesting. Well, I'm trying to think back. I think Block Architects have employed four students, I think, over my years.
Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe and maybe even a fifth one. I'll maybe name a name after we're recording.
Right, okay.
I think maybe a fifth one from a long time ago.
Begins with an R.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, actually, I was speaking to Mr. R not so long ago, and he said to me, actually, and it's interesting you said about learning and what have you, not knowing what you know until you know. So I got a phone call. And he says, Kenneth, until I left you, I never realised just how much you'd taught me. You know, because he took that and took everything we taught, he took to another practice. And funnily enough, I don't know, maybe 10 years he's left us now. He was in not too long ago asking me for a piece of advice, which is fine. He came in, had a wee conversation, and I seen some of his drawings, and I thought, you're still drawing stuff the way I taught you, you know? And it's great, you know? But then we go from all those years ago to some of the most recent employees, and I'm thinking about the person who's recording this, you know, and we're looking at just over there, talking about CGIs and all of this new stuff that's come into practice. And I think that skill set has actually revolutionised our practice, because our digital presence in terms of 3D presentations, all that stuff, is far superior to, you know. And to be honest with you, and this is what I'm trying to think about, how I'm trying to help you vocalise and how we fill the skills gap, because as an architect who's been running my practice, you know, I was always one of these ones that thought, I've got to build this building for the client. What is the minimum amount of information I need to provide? Not because of I wanted to save money and fees or anything like that, but what is the minimum amount of information I need to provide in order to get this thing on the pitch and built? And for me then, that was never about having to do, you know, 3D CGIs and fly-throughs and all that kind of stuff, because whilst it's nice to have, I didn't technically need it. My client technically didn't need it. The planners technically didn't need it to get the building on the part. But one of the things that I thought about was, let's get those services in-house and let's see how that changes the practice, and then kind of drive it in that direction. And now I think it's just revolutionised things for us, for our clients. Our clients are now saying, can you give us one of those CGI images? You know, they don't need it, but they actually want to see it.
And they can visualise it so much better. Absolutely.
Definitely.
Do you know, just kind of in the back of that, slightly off kilter, one of the things that we've had a wee bit of a rethink to an extent with one of our units that we're teaching just now. We have, up until this year, we've been teaching 3D AutoCAD for detailing. Now, detailing, super important. 3D details, do they exist at all? Pretty much out in industry. When was the last time you did a 3D detail, or any of your staff? Never. Right, okay. So we've had this big mindset saying, okay, we've been doing it in 3D AutoCAD. Do we need to do it in 3D AutoCAD? No, we don't. We can do it in Revit, okay? Do we need to do 3D details at all? And we've kind of come full circle, and we've said, right, okay, no, we don't need to do them, because you wouldn't use them for building control. You wouldn't use them. You would never generate them, or very, very seldom, if ever, in industry. But the benefit of the students seeing it, understanding it, realising what the layer set, as opposed to just looking at it as a 2D drawing and trying to understand that dash line is going to be a membrane, and you know how it's going to be. but to be able to generate it as a 3D detail, strip back the layers to be able to see the actual build-up of a wall, a foundation, a floor, a roof, or whatever it might be, an intermediate floor, see how a stairs connects to an intermediate floor, to actually be able to see that and to understand that quite a bit better. So 3D modelling within education is certainly there for considerable length of time more, definitely more beneficial for the student learning, but not necessarily for what's going to happen out in practice. And we appreciate that.
Yeah.
But the rendering, the visualisation, the CGI, the flyovers, walkthroughs, whatever they might be, they're there to help to sell your design, and they're there to help for the client to understand, to visualise, to understand what it's going to look like. And if everybody is doing it and you're not doing it, well,
it's a big advantage in the marketplace, definitely.
Yep.
I want to take you back there to your talk about the 3D detailing, because as architects we draw on the computer in theory at 1-to-1.
Yes.
Right. But we would know, for example, if we've not been asked to do a full, what's the word I'm trying to say, a full tender pack. So we're not necessarily producing 1-to-5, 1-to-10 details. So what we're producing is 1-to-50 general arrangement drawings.
Right.
So the care and attention that we would probably give to some of the positions of lines and stuff is not necessarily what we would do if we're doing 1-to-1, 1-to-5 details.
Right.
But interesting enough, I don't know if it was one of your students, but someone put something on LinkedIn the other day, and I sent it into the office, and someone had printed off their details on paper at 1-to-1.
Wow.
And I thought, actually, that's probably a good way to teach people, because I'm trying to think of the detail. I'm sure it was a foundation detail printed at 1-to-1. And you could actually look at it and scrutinise it and go, you can actually see the size of a brick.
Yes.
You can actually see the cavities, 50 mil. You can see the OSB, and you can see that actually you've not dropped the OSB all the way down to where it needs to be. You've just kind of left it hanging, halfway up a 50 mil stud, and that's a joiner would never build it. A competent joiner who knows what they're doing is never going to finish the ply at that level. And I'm thinking myself, and I said to some of our seniors, because we're always in about, although we're all qualified, said, let's keep mentoring, let's keep advancing, is maybe we should get some of the younger members of staff to actually print their details out at 1-to-1
and have a look
at them and say, right, how does because then you go, actually, I don't know how that goes together.
No.
What I'm drawing is something I kind of think works, and I'm going to leave it for the contractor to fix it, because I'm only asked to do build mortar drawings.
Right. Yes.
So I thought that was an interesting. It was just an observation with me. As much as we've got all this, and we've spoken about all this technology and all these advancements, sometimes it just goes back to good old fashioned print it out.
Yeah, print it out, get the old scale ruler out, and then let's just check and see if things are right. Yeah. Well, that's.
And we've had that in the past, because you end up with a 60 mil cavity below at your foundation level, 50 mil above, and why is it 50 mil? Because you need the 10 mil for your OSB, and we've had that in the past where we've drawn it like that, but actually the contractor's built a 50 mil cavity, so upstairs is a 40 mil
cavity. It's a 40 mil cavity.
And so it's understanding these wee 10 mil things and why we need to draw things effectively.
Absolutely. And be able to understand it from that way. Because what we've also done, and I suppose we've got the added benefit that we've got different areas within the college, so we're able to take our students over to, I don't know, to the joinery students or to the bricky students or whatever, and see what's been constructed there. So we might be talking about an intermediate floor and a stair header and how they interact and how they go in. But if we can, if the students, the carpentry or joinery students have been working on something like that, we can take the students over to physically, visually, properly see and fully understand. And again, that kind of comes back to these 3D details. Looking at it as a 2D detail, you can see it, you can understand it, but to fully get to grips and understand it, the 3D or the physically going and being able to kind of almost touch it to really get to grips with the understanding. There's no point in just being able to reproduce lines. We want the actual full understanding there. And I think that definitely benefits the students, bringing them being able to see that.
Great.
That's good.
So big challenge then for you really is to help your students get out there in the marketplace. So if there's any listeners who are maybe thinking about, I need someone to, a mock interview even just to test the waters, to see if we can get one of the students in there.
Yeah.
As I say, we've employed, I think it's, well, you said 5.
Four, right,
okay.
Yes, we'll debate on that.
Well, a handful. We've employed a handful of students, and for a small practice, that's actually quite a lot of our staffing. And all of them have been great employees. They've certainly helped us take the businesses to the next level. One of them is now out doing his own thing. He's doing residential work. He left the practice a couple of years ago. All amicable, of course.
Of course.
You would expect nothing less of him and of us. But he's away doing small residential works, and we pass him through some referrals. So he's happy with that stuff. Is there anything at all then, just to round off that subject, that you think we've missed?
I think a big thank you for all your support over the years. I think that's probably the biggest. It's having the back of industry, is having people being able to want to, it might be beneficial to you to you having somebody come in for a week of work experience. It might be a complete and utter inconvenience having somebody coming in for a week of work experience. But the benefit to the student is absolutely, totally paramount. It's something they can put on their CV and say, I've actually experienced it. And that might be just the deciding factor to whether somebody can be employed. They might have nothing else relevant or nothing else actually at all employment related on their CV. So a week of work experience, yes, is super important, and having everybody in industry supporting that, and the support that we've got just now and the continued support is tremendous. But now we were looking for jobs. We want jobs on the back of that, please. So reach out to me if you're not connected with me on LinkedIn. Do it.
That's it. Wee bit of fun.
Yeah.
Wee bit of fun. So our previous guest, I've asked, and I'm going to ask the same for yourself for your next guest, but our previous guest who didn't know who you're going to be has left a wee question.
Heck.
Right. And the question is along the lines of, if you had the power, if you had the control, what is the one thing that you would do just now to help improve the housing stock?
Housing stock, wow. Yeah. We have got so many disused offices, buildings, so many stores, so many shops. Good grief, we could kit out the whole of Hamilton Town Centre and turn that into housing, could we not?
Yeah.
We could increase housing dramatically. We've got so many, I think just, since COVID, and a lot of companies maybe reducing the size of their office space and doing a lot of remote working and, having partial time in. There must be so much empty space that we don't need to go building and starting from scratch for housing. Getting onto the property ladder, if you want to go down a completely different slant there, without it being social housing or, well, even affordable housing. How do we get our kids on that property ladder? How can anybody afford to go on the property ladder nowadays? I really don't know, but I think we've got as many a disused building, an empty building, a derelict building that does not just need to be demolished, that can be reused, repurposed, recycled, definitely.
I think that's interesting. There has been a programme in England for some time. For example, you could take, and I'm a bit vague now in the detail, I used to know it better, but you could take an office building in the middle of a kind of, an office hub, so to speak, and you could convert that for housing. And that's done quite readily down in England, and there's a minimum size of apartment, I think, which is something like, is it 29 square metres or 23 square metres or something like that. Up in Scotland, though, we've got policies. I don't just mean planning policies, but other policies that would say, well, you can't, like the office building where you're sitting in just now, you can't necessarily just take that and convert that into housing, because you've got a pub across the way, you've got more office space on about it, and they're always thinking about the amenity of the people who are living in it.
You've got to think about that.
Yeah. And I kind of get that. Yeah. But at the same time, we've got councils who are announcing they've got housing emergencies.
Yes.
We don't have enough housing. We've got kids who are and adults, I suppose, but we've got a problem with so many kids just now in Scotland who are living in unfit premises,
Yes,
you know.
yeah.
And then I kind of think as an architect, our job is to think outside the box sometimes, putting aside some of the issues with potentially converting an office building. Surely the big advantage here is that we're putting people into nice, warm, fresh
Yes.
buildings
Yes.
that they can get a roof over their heads, they have no
Yeah.
condensation, you know.
Yeah.
Maybe they don't have a front garden or a back garden, you know, but actually they're warm, they're off the streets, you know.
Exactly.
And we're
And
freeing up some of the old housing stock. The council can then go and say, right, now we don't need this as such. We can spend money on
and do
renovation
that
works.
because of course there's a lot that are staying in temporary accommodation or in hotels and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
Or in unfit, damp and not suitable at all. I did a training program with BEST, with Built Environment Smart Transformation, not far from here. And they have got, now I'm going to start telling you this and I can't remember what it's called, but they are having little individual pod buildings designed. And again, this is just for trying to, I think it's more so addressing, whether it's fully addressing homelessness or whether it's for kind of rehabilitation for people who maybe fallen on hard times. It doesn't need to be hugely expensive. So why are we not putting that investment into to being able to make everybody, it's a basic thing for people to live in a warm, clean, safe environment.
I think I agree with you. I think the challenge we've got is we've got policies just now which has for the right reasons, I'm going to say that though, that amenity space, certain build sizes of houses, quality of environment, all that stuff is a mandatory thing, and I get that is the case. But realistically, the problem's much wider than that, and we need to design solutions to get people out of substandard stock into something that's warm and dry, and then have a plan that takes them from that into the ideal. And I say the ideal, that my interpretation of planning policy and other regulations just now is they want people ideally living in cookie cutter housing estates or cookie cutter flatty developments, and front gardens, back gardens, all of that stuff. And okay, great, but there's a stepping stone missing to get to that.
And they've got to think about the infrastructure when that's there, and the amenities, and is there a shop, and is there a bus, and how do they, where are the schools, the doctors, the hospitals, and all of these dentists and stuff. And I suppose they've got to think about taking all these aspects into play. So there's one thing with saying, we're in an industrial estate here, and all these businesses could be converted into being houses, but actually, what are the amenities and what is the infrastructure here?
Don't get me, no, what I'm trying to say is I think I agree with you. I think a building like what we're in just now, which is a 3-story office building, you could have some kind of programme that says, right, there's going to be 61 bedroom studio flats in there. But the idea is that people will be living in it for a maximum of 2 years.
Yes,
That
and then
gives
they
the
move on
council
from
time
there.
to catch up, for the other building programmes to catch up, and then they move on, But this hanging around in substandard properties, waiting on the final proper destination is something that's not working.
Almost like a kind of halfway house. But something is that stepping stone.
Yeah, that's a stepping stone.
Yeah.
You don't know who our next guest is going to be?
No.
I kind of think I know who they're going to be, but depending on diary dates.
Right.
Have you a wee question you'd like to ask?
Oh, yes.
Right, go for it.
Right,
Sounds
okay.
exciting.
So, whoever you might be to my successor, first of all, congratulations, because they have now been appointed the new First Minister of Scotland.
All right, okay.
Okay. And the first act is to commission a new Scottish Parliament building in the new capital of Scotland, Glasgow.
Right, okay.
Right, I'm going all out with this one.
Right.
And it's to be passive house. So the new Scottish Parliament building will be AI generated design.
All right.
Because we're now in the year 2050.
We're in the year 2050, right, okay.
Okay.
Right.
And it will be 3D printed using recycled materials.
Okay.
So kind of the burning question is, with minimum human input, and this kind of relates back to what we've always been talking about, with minimum human input, with minimum architectural design from a human, with minimum contractor input, because it's just been 3D printed. Will the lifespan of the new Parliament building in 2050 be longer or shorter than what it is just now?
Gosh, that's a good question, isn't it? That's a great question.
And do you know where that came from?
Yeah.
ChatGPT. Well, a wee bit edited, a wee bit edited.
It's an AI question. That's an interesting one.
So with all our modern technologies, with AI and with 3D modelling and all these things, 3D printing, is it going to be better? Is it going to be worse than having the human touch?
Great question. I'll think on that one myself before I ask the question. Vivien, thank you for coming along to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Hopefully, if the listeners are tuning in, they'll give some thought to reaching out to you on LinkedIn for an interview or maybe a job offer for any of your students. I can recommend all of the team that we've taken on. And I'll catch you on LinkedIn.
Good. Thank you very much. See you soon.
Thank you, Vivien.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Hard Hat Talks. If you enjoyed the conversation, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, whether you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your shows. That way, you'll be sure to never miss an episode. If you've got any feedback or a topic you want us to tackle, please drop us a line. We'd love to hear from you. Till next time, stay safe, stay sharp, and keep your hard hat on.